What's going on, 5-9 Gaming crew? Lethal One up here, and guys, I have a 5-9 first impression of the PlayStation 5 exclusive Returnal. Now guys, I've only been able to squeeze in about like 5 to 6 hours, and let me just say, in those 5 to 6 hours, I'm still currently in the first map still. I think it's more known as the first biome. I cannot get past the first boss. It's actually a really challenging game. But I think that's what's really great about it, is that the fact that it's just not easy, right? You can't just go get to the boss and then, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some people out there that could probably straight up just get to the boss. They're good with their timing of like their dodges and evades, and they're just, they're just good. Me on the other hand, I've definitely been struggling just trying to get past the first boss. But anyways, I want to give you guys a first impression, at least my first impression of Returnal. And I gotta say, it's actually, I think the hype that it got it's totally deserving of it. The game is so much fun, and it's my first time playing a roguelike kind of game, so this is actually a first kind of experience for me for this genre as well. And I gotta say, it's definitely challenging, but it's a ton of fun. But guys, I hope you're ready. Let's go ahead and deep dive into our first impression of Returnal. All right, so I first want to start off with just some of the issues that I've had so far in my playthrough. Now, before anybody jumps up and is like, Lethal, don't forget this is a roguelike, don't complain about any lacks of saves or checkpoints. Trust me, guys, I know. And I've seen that's where most of the complaints, I think that was most of the complaints that I've seen for this game. And I think people kind of forget, like, that is the genre itself. It's designed to be like that, right? It's supposed to be a challenge. But the complaints that I have are basically, I've come across some game crashing and some soft locks. And for an example for the soft lock, essentially, if I get to a fresh cycle and I'm trying to go back into the world, essentially the first door that you come across, I just can't get through it. Like, I had to restart the cycle again because I can't interact with it. It doesn't allow you to open the door or do anything. And so you kind of just run around the little map and you can't move anywhere. So that's one instance. And then I've had a couple instances where I'm like in mid battle and the game has just crashed on me. Now, I've also seen a lot of people also talk about the game crashing on their playthrough as well. And I could not imagine going through any of those two. If I was further into, like, the map itself, and maybe I'm at the boss or whatever, I would absolutely lose my mind, especially if you have good buffs in terms of like parasites or augments that you find in the game. I would be so upset, even if you're finding good weapons. Like, losing all of that due to something that's out of your hands. Yeah, no, that's a no-no. They have to fix that ASAP, and I hope we see a patch or a fix at some point. Now, jumping into the actual game itself, on some of the things that I want to talk about that I've experienced, I want to jump in with the plot and a little bit more of Celine. So again, as you know, I'm still only in the first biome, so I haven't gotten that much. But so far, what I do know is that, Celine should not have been in Atropos. Basically, that white shadow broadcast signal kind of just brings her there, right? And then, as a result, she has her ship. It's crashing. The ship is called Helios, and it basically crashes her onto this alien planet called Atropos. And there are some moments where you do get more of the story. And in one instance, there's a moment where you do find her home in one of the parts of the first biome, to which when you enter the home, it goes from that third-person game style to a first-person view. And there's a moment where you actually find a picture of when she first became an Astro Scout. And you see, there's options to go ahead and like travel through the different rooms. But I made the mistake of going upstairs right away, because there's a moment where you start hearing noises upstairs, so your character goes upstairs. And there was a moment where I could have gone through, I think it was like a door or two, and I went immediately upstairs because I was so curious, to which basically, you walk down a little bit of the hallway upstairs, and you get like this blinding light flashes, and then you get this quick cinematic moment where it looks like you see the home in a distance, and then it quickly just turns dark, and it almost looks like you just see alien like an alien background, almost like this possibly going to be an invasion or something happened, where it just switches to dark really quickly, right? And I think you even see a moment where you see her in an astronaut view, and you're just at this point trying to figure out, what does this all mean? And this is just one of the other examples, because there's the other example that I found was you do find these glyphs throughout your time in the map, where it basically helps decode a message every time you analyze one. And I think there's like 10 or so in the first map, and I haven't found them all, but it is decoding a message, which probably helps explain, some more to this story and to more of this background. So I actually find the way that they're doing the plot pretty cool. And again, it does have that psychological aspect to it, so it is going to require a lot of thinking, which again, I totally like that, and I dig that so far. Jumping into the environment next, I want to talk about. And again, I can only speak about the first biome, which is called the Overgrown Ruins. It's basically like a dark forestry like setting. It's really beautiful. It basically has like some trees and flowers, but I keep calling them alien-like because you'll find a bunch of tentacles, and these tentacles sometimes it will either like suck you up and try to pull you, or there's sometimes they're just blocking certain pathways, which you then have to take out your blade and then cut them down that way you can get into it. You also find in the Overgrown Ruins, you'll also come across these hidden paths that basically give you access to rare augments, sometimes parasites, sometimes weapons, and pretty much the augments and the parasites from what I've learned is they're kind of like buffers for your character. They either add to your stat or they kind of give you passive abilities. Now parasites, you have to be careful because you can get some type of malignant behavior, which is like a negative status to your character, which isn't good, but sometimes you can get a positive one, and it can give you like an extra protection by like 10%. It also in the environment, you'll also come across these locked doors, almost sort of like if you played Metroid, it's very similar to that kind of style. You have to go into different parts of the maps and find these atropian keys that pretty much open up those locked doors, and it allows you to get access to more deeper parts of the map, to which again you could just find more weapons or more loot. Again, you want to find those things because when you get to that boss, you want to be as juiced up as you possibly can be. Now jumping to the weapons. Now so far I've managed to come across 4 different weapons. There's pretty much like your starter sidearm. You do come across a weapon called the Tachyomatic Carbine, the Spit Maul Blaster, and you do get the Atropian Blade. Now, pretty much the sidearm is just like your pistol equivalent. The carbine is pretty much like your assault rifle, and then your blaster is pretty much like your shotgun, and then the blade is, well, it's a blade, right? It's used for doing some melee attacks. You either take down enemies, you break down some shields, or you use it to get, like I said earlier, you use it to get past some of the tentacles for, you know, some of those blocked passageways. Each of the weapons are honestly, they're really beautifully designed. They literally look like alien tech. Like a lot of the enemies you find, you look at some of these weapons, they look like, you know, similar to some of these alien designs, which is actually really neat. One of the most interesting things that I do find in the game though is the feature called alternate fire mode. Pulling this off requires you to fully pull down the left trigger in order to activate, while if you do hold it down slightly halfway the trigger, it allows you to go ahead and aim in. Now again, fully pulling it down will activate the alternate fire mode. And you know, I did have a lot of issues where I kept trying to do like a half trigger pull in just so I can aim in, and I would accidentally hit the alternate fire mode, which would happen way too often. So maybe that's another thing that was kind of hard for me, but I am getting better with it over time so that I don't, you know, automatically pull all the way down to activate the actual alternate fire mode. There's also a feature called Overload, which is simply like an active reload feature similar to games like Gears of War, if you ever played that, where you want to time the fire button right in the middle of the indicated spot, to which you'll get like an instant reload, which is really useful. You're going to want to do that because there's lots of moments where you're going to have a bunch of enemies just coming at you. And I kind of want to jump more into more of the DualSense controller usage and get a little bit more into that alternate fire mode. And this is where I realized the best immersion, it comes right from the actual controller itself, because the way they've utilized the DualSense here is just so awesome. Now again, we talked about the alternate fire mode, right, working with the adaptive triggers. So some of the alternate fire modes, they change depending on the weapons that I found. Like sometimes the carbon had like the carbon rifle had something different from the blaster shotgun. Some of those you were seeing were like, they were like these electrical based alternate fire modes. Some were kind of like a bomb, and the other ones are more like a wide range firing mode. The cool thing is like each of these modes had their own feeling of like a haptic feedback, which was really cool. For example, the bomb one, I felt like when you were to activate it, you kind of felt like the bomb was going from the bottom of the controller up to the top and then shooting out. Like, it's weird, you actually kind of felt that, and it's hard to explain it, but it was a really cool feeling. And even like the electrical one, like you feel the controller vibrate as you're using it, so like it just really gave off the feeling that you were, you know, actually doing those maneuvers, which is really, really cool. Even other stuff too for immersion from the controller, right? The cool dash feature you get to do to helps you pretty much like boost from side to side, evading the enemy attacks. You felt that boost the moment you activated it, which is really cool. And it's some cool like other kind of environmental things that you would get from the actual controller. For example, if Selene was running through the forest, you really felt her, especially when you're sprinting. you really felt her foot, like, you know, her feet going back and forth running. You could really feel that. And there's even some really other cool effects, like if you were to happen to load into a map that had rain, you would feel it like small little droplets like on your controller, and you would even hear it too. And I have to say, like, this level of immersion with the DualSense controller, it's so like on its own level from any other PlayStation exclusive that I really played, I feel like. Except for Astro's Playroom, because Astro's Playroom was literally meant to show up that controller. I kind of want to go ahead now and jump into some of the enemies, because I felt like this is another big one, again, that I want to talk about for my first impression. Now, I've come across a pretty good range of enemies, from just your standard Cabarans, which are honestly like, they were like your more common enemies that you would run into. They were pretty versatile in some of the, well, their main move that they would do is that they would shoot these wide blue energy attacks at you, and they had like a bunch of tentacles on them. They would float around the map, and you could get hit by, you know, running into them accidentally. They would even try to kind of like bite you if you got too close. But the biggest thing that they would do is shoot out these energy attacks, which would require you, you know, to be smart in how you're going to dodge it. Whether you're going to jump over it, you're going to use your dash to kind of go, you know, to go past it. Like, you know, it was more of that common enemy that you would kind of find. And then you find into, you would find enemies like the Lamedon, which they literally looked like just flying mantises that were just like flying in the air, and they either charge up these beam attacks at you, or they would do like a tackle move, and that tackle move would do some really good damage. And when you would find these enemies, they usually came out in these crazy bulks, at least like 6 at a time, and it's usually really hard to fight each one individually. But there were some things I learned, like some tips where, like, if the Lamedon was charging up, if you shoot it, it would stop the charging. And I noticed that's a kind of a pattern with, I think, another enemy as well. But there were some enemies where it was just really hard to fight. Straight up, the Titan Ops. And I talked about this in my last video, but the Titan Ops are completely terrifying. Their damage when they hit you is almost like half your life from a single melee swing, which is pretty much like their main weapon. Not to mention, they had like these Hulk-like jumps to kind of close the gap between how far you were from them. You know, what's cool is I learned with these enemies, some of these more like, you know, mini boss enemies, they did have weak points that if you shot it enough, it did stun them, which gave you the time to go ahead and, you know, take out the kill. And, you know, going back to the enemies like the Cabarans, right, the more like common enemies, literally just took a few shots to take them out. If not, if you had your Tropium Blade unlocked, you can literally just take them out in one shot from your Tropium Blade. But honestly, I think the best feature overall for the enemies that I liked, it was their design. The tentacle appearances, oh man, it just literally made them stick out so well. And there was always a bright neon glow when you would see them come out. It's really cool. And I think it's the various attacks that were also really visually appealing, because they were all different. They all, you know, and I think what makes them all different too is the style that they fought in. Each enemy required a different way of taking them down. Again, I mentioned the Cabaran was super easy, right? I could just go ahead and melee them, I know that. But if I'm fighting like the Lamedon, for example, I'm constantly looking up, I'm constantly looking around, because again, there's so many of them that come out, and I'm looking for which one is charging a beam at me or charging a tackle attack at me. Like, it did require you to, you know, switch up your playstyle a little bit. You know, if you're just like, okay, I'm gonna run up, take them out. Nope, this one I gotta step back and, you know, get some distance to find out where they're all at. It did require a lot of that. And even with the Titan Ops, man, they were another one where you just had to really be smart, wait for them to attack, you know, evade back, hit the weak point. As soon as they got stunned, go ham, you know, use your alternate fire to take out as much damage as you could. And honestly, that was probably the coolest thing about the enemies, is the fact that, like, it did require different ways of taking them down, which is awesome, right? It never got boring. And guys, that's for overall my first impression thoughts on Returnal. I really enjoyed the game. As someone who is pretty much new to roguelikes, it was like, I know they really tried to, this Housemarque, they're really known for their arcade style games, and that's definitely the feeling I got from this, right? From something where, like, there's no checkpoints or saves, you really just kind of have to move through it. I actually really like that, because it did give me not only a challenge, but I had to make smart moves, or else it was pretty much game over and I had to restart all over the place. And I kind of like that. I think I also like the fact that every time I did die, when I came back into the map, it was different. You know, sometimes I fought a Titan Ops way later, and sometimes I fought one right away in the beginning, and I'm like, dude, I'm not even ready for this. But again, it just brings it back to the fact that it's a challenge, right? It's not a long game. That's the whole thing with it too, right? It's not a super long game. So at the same time, it's like, you know, just be smart, make the right decisions, and, you know, try to do your best to get through to it. And as someone who's still in the first biome, I can't wait to see what's in the rest of the biomes. The first boss, You guys will see a clip of that as well, of me fighting the first boss. Super hard, and they have multiple lives. Like, it's not simple. It's definitely a challenge, but I really enjoy it. But yeah, at this point, I mean, I would love to hear anybody who has played Returnal. Give me your thoughts down below. I would love to read about it. We want to see it here at 5-9 Gaming. But yeah, this is our 5-9 Gaming first impression of Returnal on the PlayStation 5. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like, and don't forget to go ahead and subscribe. I'm Lethal One Up, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.